Hey, Martin.
Hi. I'm gonna mute myself here just a sec.
Cool.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Very busy, but going good.
Oh, good. Cool. What are you working on?
I'm working with Colony these days.
Oh, okay. What's Colony?
It's a platform for launching DAOs. So it's
Oh, wow.
a DAO social network,
Wow.
as it were.
Cool.
I'm working on that, and I'm working on Swarm with Victor from the Go team.
Cool.
So we hope to be
Oh, nice.
launching
How's that
something
going?
soon. Going well. So we've been futzing around with the incentives for a really long time, like getting them all lined up. But I think we're gonna publish some papers soon, so we'll get feedback from the community.
Oh,
A lot done
nice.
recently.
Bravo. That's awesome. Hi, Piper. Vlad said he wanted to join at 11, so I guess we'll give him another minute or two. Hopefully Vitalik will join as well. He was ready at 9:15, but Vlad wanted to push it. And I wasn't sure if we'd get a whole quorum if we began at 9:15 or so. So anyway, we'll give Vlad a few more minutes and then get started.
Back in Washington there?
Yes, thank God. It's so nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful,
I'm
sunny,
out
lots
of Consensus HQ today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Well, I guess we can just give like quick updates. Martin, do you want to give an update, and then Piper, you can give an update.
I don't have too much to say, so.
Okay. No worries.
Working on tests right now.
Oh, that's always a good thing.
Also did a little bit more research on LLVMIR.
Oh, okay, cool. Cool, that's really good. Yeah, I read your comments, that summary you gave me. I want to dig a little bit further, but that's a little more promising. I still need to understand. I want to see the claims backed up a little bit, but that's a little more promising. I wasn't able to find good documentation on LLVM specifically in terms of the semantics, which is a little disconcerting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Piper. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So I've been working on essentially taking the proof of concept for Casper in the PyEthereum code base and getting that so that it's runnable as like a real test network. Most of the way there. I'm still waiting on a little bit of code from one of the other Python developers that's moving some storage stuff out of memory so that it can actually be run for real. But getting close to something that's probably actually runnable as a test network for Casper. So that's promising.
Cool. That's awesome. Oh, just in time.
Hello.
Hi there. We heard from Aaron and Martin and Piper. Anyone else want to give an update? Vitalik, you want to give an update?
Well, I kind of talk about everything that I've been thinking about on Skype already. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I thought you and Vlad wanted to have a more of a deep dive, and we were just kind of going through updates.
Yeah.
While we were waiting to see if Vlad would join. Okay, cool. So one thing is that Rick Dudley and Vlad and I had a very interesting discussion. I think they at least understood the justification structure that I was proposing in bets, and that has that makes it a lot easier to achieve certain kinds of properties, but it also makes it easier to see how a bet is actually a word in the IFS. I should also mention that the justification structure is closely related to Highland and Abramsky-Ong games. So it does tie the thing back into game theory, but it's a slightly different kind of game theory. I'll give some links here just a second.
Do you have a description of your justification strategy anywhere?
Yeah, so that's what I was giving kind of a quick sketch, like actually in the Slack. But the justification structure for the bets is pretty straightforward, right? When a validator receives a bet, the bet contains not only the claim that the bet is supporting, but also a pointer to the bet that justified that new bet. And so every bet is effectively a chain of bets, and that makes it possible to impose the kind of slashing conditions that I was considering with respect to the IFS, but it also makes it possible to impose, the kind of slashing conditions that Aaron was considering with respect to moving things off the barycenter. So that's
what kind of slashing conditions, for example?
well, so for example, in the one that the one I was considering with the IFS, a bet, a new bet has to be at least as good as the worst performance of a word that length in the IFS that gets you towards the attractor. In the case of Aaron's proposal, the bet has to move you off the barycenter. So you can check that
but that just means that a bet has to be kind of more certain than or lower entropy than a previous bet.
Pretty much, that's correct. But what you're really trying to do, like in either of those strategies, what you're really trying to do is to reduce the dimensionality, right? So that you can kind of iterate the whole thing. So you want to move things off far enough that you can remove one of the vertices. Right. That's
right.
Yeah. So that's kind of the idea. The other thing that we thought about while we were in New York was if you can being able to, like, it would be possible. I mean, Aaron, check this reasoning. Maybe I've got this wrong, but it seems like it would be possible to appear to move off the barycenter, but really just wiggle around a sphere for some time. So, but you ought to be able to detect that after a certain number.
I mean, for any particular bet, you can figure out what the entropy is. So it shouldn't be hard to figure out whether it's closer to the center than the previous bet or not.
Yeah, no, but what we're worried about is that you can kind of, it could be like an ant crawling around the sphere. So
Well,
yeah,
the way I had envisioned it was a little more complex than just moving off the barycenter. It's also you cannot sort of cross lower dimensional vertices of the dual subdivision.
right.
So that would you can't really keep going round in circles.
Right.
Because of that.
Right.
So sorry, what was that? The dual what?
The dual subdivision. So it's let's say you have 3 competing blocks, and the barycenter would be the same probability for all 3. But you'd be crossing a dual simplex whenever you change the relative weights of 2 of them. So when you went from saying one, okay, I'm not saying this right. See, I need a blackboard to talk.
I understand.
Look at that video there. Write it on a piece of paper and then hold it up to your camera.
Yeah, maybe I'll hang on. No. Well, let me just try to say it again. If you're just having 3 blocks, so you're looking at a 2-simplex, that's like a triangle. You've got the midway points of all the 3 sides. They're the barycenters of the 3 edges, and the point right in the middle is
Yes.
the barycenter of the whole thing. And the connecting lines from the midpoint to the barycenters of the edges, those are simplices of the dual subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're in one of these segments, and so if the average of all the previous bets is in one of these segments, I would not allow my bet to change in such a way that the average bet crosses one of these dual subdivisions.
Okay.
So it's not just the barycenter itself, but my personal bet is allowed to jump from one side to the other as I update it, but the average of all the bets is not allowed to, as I see them, is not allowed to cross one of those lines.
Right. So the average of the bets in the justification of that, right, which is not the same as the average of all the bets.
No, it's what I'm using to justify, which is presumably what I've seen, but my justification.
Right, exactly. So I mean, you can still use, communication delays to keep it equivocating, but yeah.
Yeah, I suppose you could. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise that's. I mean, if you couldn't use communication delays to keep it equivocating, it would contradict FLP impossibility.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could suppose also, try to get the rules so that it's not just not crossing these dual simplices, but the movement of the average as a projection onto these dual simplices has to take you off the barycenter.
Yeah, exactly.
So that you quickly converge to a lower dimensional simplex, and then you have already thrown out one of the blocks.
Right. That's the more simple solution that I was talking about. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it.
Oh, Vlad joined and then disappeared. Hopefully he can rejoin. Okay, here he is. You guys keep talking. I'm just looking for a link.
Mm-hmm.
Hi guys. Sorry to drop in late. I'm also probably gonna have to leave early. Turns out I booked time for working on reputation systems with Matan and Primavera, who don't know when they'll arrive, but probably they'll arrive late.
Oh, dude, can you include me in a hangout so that we can so I can join? Awesome.
I'll do that. Once everyone gets here.
I also have just a practical question right now.
Yes.
With all the Skype to Gitter to whatever multi-chat echoing, I'm getting a little lost as to what's going on. Where's the best place to follow the conversation? Is that IRC or is it Gitter, or are they literally all the same now? And I can just.
I know the Skype and the Gitter are exactly the same. I haven't been on IRC, so I'm not sure if the channel there is mirrored.
Okay. So I guess Gitter is easier to follow.
Yep. Unless, of course, you like Skype more.
Yeah, Skype on Linux is a really old version too. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So have we covered the whole, betting with justifications topic yet?
Well, we just described the structure, and we just described how it was necessary, both that you needed it in order to do Aaron's approach and to do my approach with the iterated function systems. So I mean,
the reason to me why it's really necessary is in order to make it so that the only way to have more exposure to loss is to be working together with more validators, so that clients can use the 4-choice rule by measuring exposure to loss. Whereas, like, otherwise, you'd have this property that, like, you could have a validator who's working by himself with a tiny amount of stake pretend that he's very confident that this will be the state, even though he wouldn't have seen enough messages from other validators from the other stake to really. And so, like, the fork choice rule can only work on exposure to loss in the presence of this kind of justification.
Yeah, so this is why I think exposure to loss is a bad fork choice rule.
The reason it's a nice fork choice rule is because exposure to loss is the economic assurance of a proposition, right? Like the client can only really be as sure as, like in purely economic terms, that it's only about loss, as sure as the attacker would have to spend in order to falsify that claim.
I mean, keep in mind that that doesn't technically hold up because attackers are always free to make bets as large as they want out of band.
Right. So, sure, but you know, that's true. But the client also care. Like the idea that everyone has the same fork choice rule is part of why people have consensus. And if people have are paying attention to different bets, then like we don't really have any guarantee of consensus.
Right, but the point is that like because there's the possibility of people making bets out of band, if you assume attackers doing that, you don't really have a correspondence between the total number of or the total quantity of exposure inside the Casper protocol and the actual total quantity of exposure.
Yeah, totally. But the exposure inside the protocol, for some reason, to me, seems like the most significant because that's the one that like people are going to use for their fork choice rule because the protocol sets the fork choice rule. And, you know.
Well, if the protocol sets the fork choice rule, we could just set the fork choice rule to something more sensible.
As long as you don't end up in like believing a version of history that no one else does, then that's cool.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be like some kind of backwards compatibility to any fork choice rule changes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. People should be using like roughly similar fork choice rules, although it doesn't necessarily have to be quite the same one.
Yeah, but they have to be like similar in some important sense.
Sure. Yeah. And they have to be like not vulnerable to one particular or a small amount of stake making a very confident bet earlier on when no one else is and so forth.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So
I think exactly what I want to avoid is basically an equilibrium where the first person to, no matter to put a large stake, is the one who determines which block is chosen.
Right. So I mean, I think that's. I think if the default equilibrium is to ignore someone putting a very large amount of stake, then I don't think anyone else has too much incentive to do that, or to pay attention to it.
Yeah, but that's not going to be the equilibrium. The equilibrium is just going to be that the idea is just going to be that you can't place a large amount of stake until you saw some amount place a slightly less amount at stake, without it being like invalid.
Right, but I just don't see the point in actually preventing that. I prefer just setting the strategy to be ignoring it.
Yeah, so I mean those are two options. To me, it seems more elegant to always use exposure to loss as a fork choice rule.
To me, it always seems more elegant to try to put more complex stuff in the strategy rather than the protocol.
Yeah, I mean I hear you. That's like a place where we commonly have disagreements.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, from an architectural point of view, if you put more in the strategy, that's easier to evolve than the protocol usually.
But from the protocol point of view, if you allow any strategy, there's more area for things to go wrong.
correct. Yeah. So yeah, in terms of that's an interesting set of trade-offs there.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I understand this correctly, Vlad, the idea that you're proposing here is basically at a protocol level, disallowing extremely early high stake betting, and sort of making it so that it ramps up towards people putting higher amounts of stake as the betting process goes on, rather than allowing it to just like initialize at a really high level.
Yeah, basically you have to like justify the high stake bets with slightly lower stake bets from other people, and exactly like what is allowed, I'm not 100% sold on yet, but you know, I definitely I think there's a lot of promise to Greg's approach of like restricting this space only to things that like look like they're trying to converge, or that like if they're in an IFS will have certain stable points.
I know this idea of like trying to restrict to things that only look like they're trying to converge feels a bit weird, I think, because so the problem is that if the protocol can figure out which direction is anti-convergence, then that kind of implies that everyone knows which direction is pro-convergence, which means that you've already figured out which block is finalized.
No, actually, that turns out not to be the case. Well, first of all, what you can show with the IFS approach is that it includes all possible ways of getting to convergence. Not that there's one way of getting to convergence, but there are a very, very large number of ways that can get to convergence.
Yes.
And all you're doing is excluding all of the ways that you cannot converge. So what it does is it prevents divergence, but it doesn't prevent people from finding much more efficient ways to converge. So they're super incentivized to converge and to find really efficient ways to converge.
But on the other hand, Vlad is talking about explicitly basically preventing convergence from happening too quickly.
No, right. So basically, the thing that I don't want to do is to be able to have some validators place large amounts of deposits on one option and some validators place large amounts on another, in order to basically confuse clients.
Yeah, but
so there's a couple of concepts of convergence, right? There's like everyone is betting in the same way, and then there's the exposure to large payout, the exposure to large losses. What I don't want to do is be able to get up in a situation where there is no way to proceed without someone taking a large loss, unless they, without like Byzantine behavior. But I definitely don't prevent it from oscillating, because what I specifically want is for this to work in failure modes where convergence isn't happening.
So I just want to be clear that this discussion is independent of, like, if you have a justification structure, you're not forced to slow down or have incremental betting. You can still have incremental betting with a justification structure. It's just that the justification structure enables this kind of slow, steady ramp up, as well as enabling the other two approaches that we've been considering.
Well, the justification structure seems to be more inherently about disabling stuff.
No, all it's doing is just simply saying this was it's basically putting the opinion structure into the messages in the bets.
What do you mean by opinion structure?
It's this is what I've seen. So this is my, the validator is declaring this is what I've seen, and this is justification for placing this bet.
Right.
So but that doesn't mean that I mean, you can say from a given history what's justified. That the set of rules that are about what is considered justified is completely flexible. It's just you're including the view of the validator as a part of the bet.
I just want to make sure I understand this right, too. The idea would be basically that alongside my bet, I would submit sort of my... these are the other bets that I've seen that have made me feel this way. This is like the other people's probabilities, and this is why I'm betting this way, sort of providing those numbers. And I'm assuming that justification data is also provable, right? Like other people can look at that and say, oh, I've seen these bets too. Okay, this is...
Precisely.
So the other thing that seriously concerns me is there is overhead.
Yeah, I don't see these messages as particularly large, right? These are going to be in smallish bytes, right?
Well,
If you,
hold on. So this is so.
Well,
So
once
how many bytes do you expect the justification components of a bet to be?
let's see. Well, let's say we have invalidators, and
Let's
in a,
say n is 500. Okay.
yeah. So and you,
the
um,
real question is how often do you make bets, right? And
no,
then
no, it's how often each validator makes a bet.
they can make bets. They can make bets all the time if they want to, and it would create a lot of overhead. But they could also create less bets less often, and it'd still pretty much be as like the same consensus properties. Only things would happen a little slower. And then
Well, hold on. I'd still like to
asymptotically, there
see the
wouldn't.
answer.
There's no
How
reason.
many
I mean,
bytes?
come on, this is just
There's no reason to assume
calculate.
that there would ultimately need to be more bets than there will be DAGs blocks in your DAG algorithm.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, you can calculate an upper bound, assuming that you reach convergence in, you know, in m rounds of betting.
Right. So, but there's not clear rounds, right? I mean, anyone like I could produce 100 bets while you produce one. Like our
Yeah,
round.
but the point is, the point is, you're only going to be producing the justification structure for a particular height is not going to be the same as its justification structure at another height.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're not.
If I have two nodes, I just broadcast bets back and forth to each other, and they each always get new justifications and new bets. And like I can make a lot. I can make a huge tower, while the network is making a small number of heights. I definitely don't want to think about like so I want to be able to have an arbitrary DAG of bets and bets justifications. I don't want to have to restrict the number of rounds or anything. But in terms of overhead, I mean, I don't see why it's not enough to just make people pay for their bets.
What do you mean pay for their bets?
I mean, if you have to pay a fee for when you make a bet, then that's
So the approach that I'm thinking of, so I'm actually right now pretty convinced on this force exactly one bet in each block and not more paradigm.
Right. So what I was suggesting earlier is that there's no reason to really say that has to be less bets than this.
Wait, so you're saying each validator makes one bet and that's it? We're all done?
No, I'm saying that every time there's a block, that block contains a bet, and that's the only time that validator can make a bet.
So he's identifying bets and blocks as the same structure.
Yeah. So basically the reason why I'm doing that is because it creates the lowest possible consensus overhead for a given block time.
Yeah, I guess.
So can a validator have two bets in the same block, or they only get one bet in one
One
block?
bet.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, I guess if justifications are to exist, like the least bad way of doing it would be just to kind of incorporate them into the existing kind of block hash structure, I suppose.
Exactly.
So, like, if a block points to a parent, that that itself is pointing to a previous bet.
Yeah, so you end up being able to recover the justification structure in that kind of structure.
Yeah. Okay. Looks like I'm gonna have to step away early as well here.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, actually, let's. So, are we on for Monday? And do we want to have it?
Yeah.
The usual 7 a.m.
Yep. Monday usual time sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds
Great.
good. I mean, I'm a little bit sorry for you, Greg, to have to wake up at 7 a.m. But
No, I'm up at 4, so I've already had like 3 hours of work.
good.
All right. See you guys.
Okay. Ciao. Hey, Vlad.
Yep.
Will you just ping me? Or,
Yeah.
wait, what's your target? Because I might want to go swimming.
Sure. So basically, I Primavera should have been here half an hour ago, and should be here in a half an hour. So
Okay.
that's the only information I have.
Okay, fine. All right. Well, I'm at 12 noon. I'm gonna go swimming, and just ping me. I'll be back around 1:15. So if you
Great.
guys are working, then just ping me.
Enjoy.
All right. Ciao, guys.
Bye, Greg.